Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, otherwise known as Hypnot Hooray Online, and this is podcast episode 17. I am really excited to be filming this podcast episode. It's not a number that's particularly significant or special, number 17, but it does mark 1 year since I started my YouTube channel. I actually think it was last week. It was sometime in late September, so I did miss it to the date, but it has been 1 year since I've started posting on this channel, and yeah, I'm really excited that there's so many of you that wanted to stick around. When I started this channel, I really didn't have very much expectation. I just thought I love chatting about my knitting. I love just yapping endlessly about yarn and all the little details about projects. So I wanted to start this channel and make videos as long as I was having fun. And I've been having a lot of fun with this channel so far. So thank you all for sticking around if you're a returning viewer. I am thinking of filming a Q&A maybe. I haven't done that before on the channel, and I thought what better opportunity than the 1 year anniversary. So if that is interesting to you, let me know. I can either build it into a particular segment in a future podcast episode, or it can be a standalone, maybe knit and chat. Yeah, just let me know if that is interesting. I think it'd be fun to film one, so I'm thinking of putting a questions box on an Instagram story, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, 1 year since starting this channel. And I just wanted to film a podcast episode now because I have one finished object to share. I have some progress on a few whips. I just started a test knit. It's the first test knit that I've done in several months. So yeah, I thought it'd be a really nice time to film a little bit of an update. So we can start with the finished object. I don't know if you can guess which one it would be out of my late summer knits. But it is my Cumulus Tee. I finished this a few days ago. I'm still working on the Barco Bolero. I'll chat about that in a bit, but this is one of my late summer knit finish objects. So I've spoken about the Cumulus Tee many times before. It's a pattern by Petite knit. It's top down raglan construction all over stockinette, I-cord, edging here, a pretty shallow V neckline. Yeah, I don't know if there's too much else to say about it because I have spoken about it a lot. I know a lot of other people have knit this pattern before as well. This is the third version of this tee that I knit. And yeah, I'm just really happy to have this very simple basic. It is knit with 3mm needles, and I knit here the size extra small. I knit a Cumulus Tee last summer, and it was a 3/4 length sleeve, and so I essentially wanted to do the exact same thing, but I just wanted to extend the sleeves as long as possible because with this yarn I'm using Illimani Sabri. I'm forgetting the shade name. It's like a light heathered gray. I will add those details in the description box, but I had 50 more meters. I had 800 meters in total, and I knew from that second version that I could get a 3/4 length, pretty cropped Cumulus Tee out of 750 meters. So I had a feeling that it could be done, and I decided because I wear that one so much, especially over skirts and dresses, I wanted to knit a third one in a pretty neutral color. So this one is basically identical to that one. I followed the stitch counts and the row counts exactly for the yoke of the tee. And then once I split for the body, I knit to 24 centimeters here before working the I-cord bind off. And with the second version, I didn't do the decreases that are integrated into the bind off because I thought that it would kind of cinch it in a little bit funny, but I mentioned in my last podcast episode that the bottom of that tee is kind of starting to flare out a little bit. It could also be because I used cotton merino, which I think is a little bit stretchier, more elastic. But I kind of regretted that with that tee. So for this one, I did work the decreases just like it's specified in the pattern. And maybe I can hold it up and show you. You can see that the tee does cinch in a little bit at the bottom, but not a lot. And I'm thinking that that's going to help with how it's going to fit over time and not stretch out. So yeah, ended up following that to pattern. And then for the sleeves, I worked those a little bit differently. Hopefully you can tell on camera, but I did a tapered sleeve, I guess. I worked different intervals of decreases, so I didn't follow the pattern there. Once I picked up stitches, actually, you don't really have to pick up stitches, but once I put the stitches that I put on hold when I was splitting for the raglan back onto the needle, I ended up doing decreases every 12 rounds, and then I did that 3 times, and I switched to doing them every 10 rounds, repeated that 3 times, then 8 rounds, repeated 3 times, and then 6, and then the remaining section here, I just decreased every 6 stitches, I think maybe 7 times instead of 3, and then it just got this pretty gradual taper. And then for the I-cord bind off, I didn't do the decreases for this bind off because I figured that it would just make the sleeve a little bit too tight, and it was already quite fitted at the bottom here, so no decreases on this one. And yeah, I'm really happy with the fit. As expected, I knew that I was going to be happy with the fit of this pattern because I like the second one that I've knit so much. And as for the pattern, I really don't have that much to say besides that I really like it. I do have a few minor comments though. It is just a really nice classic construction. The 3mm needles is a really nice finished fabric. I really like the clean finishing, and I like how the raglan sits. It's more of a wider raglan, I guess you could say, and I really like how that fits along the shoulders. I think it just looks really nice. It really just elongates everything. So I do like the fit of this raglan construction as well. The V neckline is a little bit more shallow. I think if I were to knit this a 4th time, I don't think that I would, but if I were, I would maybe modify it so the V neckline is a little bit deeper on that one. It's still really nice on this, but I do find that it is a little bit shallow, so if you did want to change the look a little bit, you just, I guess, would continue working the increases here before joining it in the round. Petite Knit has 2 versions of this tee now. There's the original Cumulus Tee, which is the V-neck, and then she now has the Cumulus Tee O-neck. And at the time when I was chatting about this pattern, I thought that they were honestly the same thing, but just one had a V-neck and one had an O-neck. But someone had commented that actually the distribution of stitches for the raglan and then the fit of it as well is a little bit different. So I guess if you were thinking of knitting this pattern, I would just take a look at both of them and figure out what your preference is, because it's not just the neckline, it's also how it fits along the shoulders, the raglan construction. But otherwise they're a pretty similar pattern, but there are 2 versions that you can pick. I don't know if I would knit the O-neck, I'm not sure, just because I have now 3 V-necks, but yeah, something to consider. And the last thing I wanted to chat about with this tee is the yarn. So the yarn that I use is Illimani Sabri. I forget the shade name, but it is like a marled light gray. The yarn is 85% cotton and 15% alpaca, and I think the marlin comes from the alpaca. I'm just looking at how it appears in the finished fabric and the way that it feels. I think that the alpaca is the dark gray, almost black flecks, which creates that marl. So I do really like how that looks. I just liked working with this yarn. I didn't love it. I find that this finished fabric is quite heavy, and the finished fabric is quite not stiff, but just thick, I guess. It is 400 meters for every 100 grams, but it just feels different than a fingering weight wool or like a cotton merino blend. Comparing it to knitting for olive cotton merino, that's, I think, the only other cotton wool blend that I've worked with before. But yeah, it is just a little bit heavier. It is a little bit stiffer. I think because both cotton and alpaca are heavier fibers, it does have nice drape because of that, but yeah, it is just a little bit more stiff, I would say. If I were to knit another tee, maybe not the Cumulus Tee, but another fingering weight summer tee like this, I probably would prefer the knitting for olive cotton merino. It's just bouncier, it's more lightweight, there's still enough drape to that fiber, and it's not as thick as this one. I do really like the Illimani brand though, so I am looking into trying other yarns from that company. But I didn't love working with Sabri, if I'm being honest, at least for a tee like this. Maybe for a tank it would be a little bit better. The yarn is pretty affordable though. I think when I had bought it at the time, it was $17 or $18 for a 100 gram skein. So in total, this project cost me just under $40 to make, which I thought is pretty reasonable for this yarn. And also I really like all of the values and I guess the practice of the company as well. I think it's a Canadian company from Montreal. I don't know entirely, but I think that's where the company is based. And something odd that I noticed about this yarn is how it kind of shrunk with blocking. So when I had cast off the Cumulus Tee, I tried it on and the sleeves were still pretty fitted, but at least relaxed. And then I blocked this tee, I guess in the same way that I normally block all of my garments. It was pretty warm water, maybe like borderline pretty hot water, just from the tap though. And then I submerged this for about 30 minutes until I kind of remembered that it was there essentially. But that's kind of the process that I follow with all of my knit garments. And then I squeezed out the excess water and then rolled it up in a towel and then blocked it to the measurements that I wanted. And I wasn't really thinking about checking the circumference of the sleeve, so I didn't really stretch it out with blocking. I don't normally do that unless I want to stretch out a ribbed hem, so I don't normally do that, to be fair. I just wasn't thinking about that. And when I tried on the tee again, the sleeves are quite fitted. They're still comfortable to get over my hand, like it doesn't get stuck or anything like that, but it is quite fitted. And this isn't the best representation, but I don't know what it was. Maybe I'm thinking it must be the yarn, because I followed the same process for blocking this as any other garment, and I never really have that happen to me before. It didn't really stretch out or shrink in length at all, just in width, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe it was the yarn, because it is a cotton yarn. I'm not really sure yet, but I did find that to be a little bit odd, the way that it behaved after blocking. It's still a tee that I enjoy and that I like. I just wasn't expecting it to shrink that much. If I knew that ahead of time, I probably wouldn't have worked this many decreases, so then it would still be relaxed. Maybe with wear, it's going to stretch out a little bit more, but that was a little bit unexpected with this yarn as well. So yeah, all in all, I enjoyed working with the yarn. I didn't love the experience, and I think I prefer other wool cotton blends for summer garments in the future, but I am still happy with the tee. And now moving on to whips. The first whip that I want to share is the Barco Bolero by Sofie Sorensen. So it's an extremely cropped sweater, and I am excited to have it as a layering piece over some tank tops that I have. So this is my progress so far. The Barco Bolero is knit top down and knit in two separate pieces, at least for the body. So you work the back and the front identically, and then you join them for a very small section underneath in the round before you cast off. And then you bind off. I modified it and I bound off in an I-cord bind off. And then once you bind off the body, you then graft the shoulders together, so the front and the back panel, with a Kitchener stitch. So I did that, and then you pick up stitches to knit the sleeve. For the Bolero, I'm knitting a size extra small, but I found that the number of stitches to pick up for the underarm for the size extra small was very odd. I thought that there wasn't enough stitches, just based off of the stitch count and just gauging it off of other patterns that I've knit with a 4mm needle. And even the pickup ratio was really odd. It almost evened out to be like every other stitch, which I found was a little bit odd for the sleeve. So I ended up changing the pickup ratio. I picked up the number of stitches for a size medium. So I think my sleeve is going to be a little bit bigger and a little bit more relaxed than what is intended. But I just thought that the original pickup ratio was a little bit odd. It wasn't going to work for me. So picked up the medium, and then once you pick up the stitches, you're working a lot of short rows to create this sleeve cap here. So you're working short rows just to shape the fabric here. And then once you're done, you basically work the short rows all the way to the bottom, and then you're just working in the round. For this sleeve, I'm going to put a photo here of what it looks like, but the sleeve has a bit of a bell shape at the bottom, and I wasn't sure how that was going to work, but it's a pretty simple construction, I guess. So once you finish working the sleeve cap, then you work a few rounds of decreases here, and then to start creating a wider sleeve, you just change the needle size. So I have done the first needle size change here, and then you work that for a particular amount, and then you switch to another larger needle size, and then you work till the end. And I don't know how I fully feel about that. I think I would have preferred if you worked increases, because I don't know how I feel about the gauge and the look of the stitches also changing. Maybe it's because I've been knitting it and I can see it, but I can even see between the switch from 4mm to 4.5, like the stitches look different now. And then when I switch again to 5mm, they're gonna change again. And I don't know how I fully feel about that. I think I would have preferred if the bell sleeve was shaped with increases. So the look of the stitches would have stayed the same, but I can also see why switching to a larger needle size would also help with the drape of the sleeve as well, like for the bottom of the bell sleeve, if you want it to have a bit more drape and have a bit more of a relaxed fit. I can see why changing the needle size would help with that, but I don't know. I don't know if I fully like the look. I also am knitting this in black, so I feel like it's even less noticeable, but if I were to have knit it in a lighter color, I think it would have kind of bothered me a little bit. So that is how the sleeve is shaped with the Barco Bolero. There's quite a bit going on, but it is a fun construction. So working on that first sleeve, and then I'll get to working on the second sleeve, and then I'll be done, because this is an extremely cropped sweater. I'm not too sure about the way that I bound off the body. I did modify it. I was thinking of modifying it to a 1x1 rib bind off, but I didn't want it to stretch out. The original bind off as instructed in the pattern is to do just a knit bind off, but I was worried that the fabric would curl a little bit too much, so I did an I-cord. But I tried on the Bolero and it is pretty tight at the underarm. I'm thinking that maybe with blocking it might stretch out a little bit, but it is a little bit tight. I can change it afterwards because there is that little bit of fabric before you cast off, so I can still undo this and then redo it even with the sleeves done. So that's why I'm kind of waiting. I might just block it and then see how I feel, but I might have to change my modified bind off for the body. It's not fitting exactly how I thought it would, so I think if I were to modify it, maybe I'll bind off, like work a few rounds of purl stitch, or I don't know. If you have any suggestions down below for a bind off that will help with the curling, I am all ears. So I might have to change that. But yeah, coming along with the Barco Bolero, pretty fun construction so far with the sleeves. I think for the order of whips, I'll just chat about all of my garments first. So the next whip that I wanted to share is the Peacock Cardigan, which is a pattern by Knit. And this was a pattern that I mentioned in my fall knitting plans. So this is the progress so far. It doesn't look like very much, but I have been working on the lace motif. So the Peacock Cardigan is a top-down round yoke lace cardigan. So you are working the lace stitch here, and then after you finish working the lace motif, you then work a few rounds. Actually, I probably shouldn't say a few because I'm not too sure, but you work a raglan construction to continue shaping the yoke of the cardigan while also working short rows. And then you split for the body and the sleeves, and then those are worked in a pretty simple stockinette. So I think that this is a pretty good beginner lace project because you're only working the lace in the yoke, and then after that you're just working stockinette. And I also find that the feather and fan is just a really simple knit as well. I did mention in my last podcast episode that I was having a bit of trouble with the lace motif. It is worked in a different way from the Peacock Tee, so I think I would recommend knitting the Peacock Tee first as a beginner lace project, just because it's in the round, so you don't have to read the chart forwards and backwards. And the lace motif is also even, as I mentioned. This one you have to read the lace chart forward and backwards, and the peacock or the feather and fan motif is not even. Like for example, one of the rows you might be beginning with 3 purl stitches and then you end with 4 purl stitches, so it's just another thing to keep track of, especially when you're knitting flat. But I think If you're up for the challenge, it's not particularly difficult. I just had a bit of difficulty when following the pattern. But I'm starting to get the hang of it now, and I know what to look out for when I'm looking at the chart. Hopefully I'm not scaring anyone from knitting lace or anything like that. It may just be like a me issue with reading the pattern, but I did struggle a little bit at the beginning. But now, yeah, got the hang of it, and I understand what is happening. I did leave a few notes in my Ravelry project page if you're interested and you just want to read through it before you start this project, of what to look out for, because I messed up a few times at the beginning, but yeah, we're getting through it. So I'm just working the lace motif now. I think I'm about a third of the way done. So it's getting bigger and bigger. I'll probably have to switch to a larger needle size soon. But yeah, really enjoying it. I mentioned in my last podcast episode that I did modify the cast on as well. You're supposed to cast on in a tubular cast on and then work the 1x1 rib neckband before you then switch the needle size and then go straight into the lace motif. But I was worried that that was going to cause the neckband to stretch out over time. I know that that is a concern with this cardigan. Florence of Handmade by Florence mentioned it. I did see it also in Ravelry project pages, so I decided to just cast on with a long tail cast on, so there was a little bit of a stronger seam here, and then I'll pick up stitches later to do the 1x1 rib button band. And for that, I actually picked up stitches to work that because I figured I kind of want to see how the neck band is going to fit before I continue on with this lace, because I don't know if you can tell, but it is like pretty wide right now. But I've done this modification when I knit the wave sweater, and I also did that because I was worried that the neck band was going to stretch out over time. So I did that, and the neckband fits really well on that. I was able to cinch it in by just adjusting the pickup stitches here, the ratio of stitches to pick up. So I was just going to repeat the same thing for this cardigan, but I wanted to do it earlier rather than later so I could really see how it was going to fit along the shoulders. But then I started thinking about how I wanted the neckband and the button band to look. So I never really noticed this until I knit the Esther jacket, or before I attempted to knit the Esther jacket before I frogged it. But I think I prefer the look of a high crew neck cardigan that has the 1x1 rib button band, and then the neckband is over top of that. So I'll put some pictures here to illustrate what I'm thinking, and hopefully I'm going to explain this concisely. But essentially with the Peacock cardigan, since you already knit the 1x1 rib for the neckband at the beginning, when you go to pick up stitches for the button band, you're picking up those stitches on top of the neckband, and then that's what's at the front or at the top here. But when I was knitting the Esther jacket, because you knit the 1x1 rib button band first and then you pick up for the neckband, it just got me thinking about that modification for this cardigan, and I think I prefer the look of that. It's a pretty aesthetic difference. I don't think that there's any big functional differences really. I just prefer the look of the neckband rib on top of the button band. It's, yeah, a very minor difference, but I just think it looks cleaner. It's more subtle as well. So yeah, I ended up ripping back, and I'm going to do that at the very end. There is a little bit of risk with that though, I guess, because I don't know how this is going to fit. I hope that I hope that the way that I've cast it on now, it's going to work out, but there's a risk that I'll knit the whole cardigan and then I'll knit the 1x1 rib neckband at the end, and I'm not going to be very happy with it, and it's still going to be a little bit too wide. But yeah, that is the risk that I'm going to take. And I'm just going to continue working the lace yoke like this, and then yeah, that'll be the last step for this cardigan. So slow progress on it. I mentioned as well that I wasn't too sure about the finished fabric because it is a little bit more stiff. So I didn't mention, but the yarn that I'm using is Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in the shade Hazel. And then I've paired it with this yarn that I got from Omomo. Someone had left a comment and translated what the yarn brand is, so thank you so much. It is Hitsuju Chan Natural. Yes, I'm hoping that I remembered that correctly. If not, I'll put it down below. But yes, thank you for that translation. And then this is the combination together. So the mohair is a little bit darker than the wool. And since this is a sport weight and the pattern calls for fingering weight and mohair, this is creating a little bit of a thicker fabric. So I was a little bit worried, but as I continue knitting it up, I think that thickness really helps with the lace, I think. And I think it will also help with the structure of the cardigan as well. Since it is a higher crew neck, I think it is better if the fabric is a little bit thicker, and just adds a little bit more structure. So I'm happy with it. I'm going to continue working the lace motif and report back in the next podcast. Okay, and the next whip that I have to share is my last garment, and it is my Jenny jacket v-neck. I didn't speak about this cardigan in episode 16 because I just didn't feel like I had that much progress on it, but I have made a little bit of progress and I have a bit of an update on it. So this is my Jenny jacket v-neck, and it's a pattern by Petite knit. This is a top-down drop shoulder cardigan that's worked in this all over smock stitch on 4mm needles. And the yarn that I'm using is Knit Picks palette. I forgot for a sec. Knit Picks palette in the shade Finley Heather. Sorry, I can't remember because I'm getting it confused with this one. Knit Picks palette in the shade Finley Heather, and then Knit Picks Aloft in the shade Plover. So a cool tone gray, and this one has a pretty light heathering to it. So I'm using that yarn for the cardigan, and in terms of my progress, I finished the front panels and then I've joined it. I've joined the front panels to the back panel and now just working the body. I had a little bit of a dilemma with this cardigan, and so it kind of, I kind of had some slow progress on it the last few weeks. And it's mainly because of how the cardigan is fitting, or how the jacket, is fitting. So when I was working the back and then the front panels together, I was a little bit worried about how it was going to fit, because before blocking, this cardigan measured 42 centimeters in diameter. So just like across from point to point, it was only 42 centimeters. And then when I was doing the math, I was like 42 times 2 is going to be 84 for a finished bust, and that is just too small. So I had a bit of a dilemma on what to do. I was like, should I cast on the size extra small or should I cast on the size small? There's really not that big of a difference. I think the bust circumference changes either like 5 or 6 centimeters. I think it's 5 centimeters. For the extra small, the finished bust is 101 centimeters, and for the small, the finished bust is 106. So it's really a small difference, but in my head I was like, that's gonna totally change how the jacket's gonna fit. I don't know what to do. And the way that this cardigan, I keep saying cardigan, but the way that this jacket is constructed is you don't really have to decide that if you are between sizes or you're debating which one to cast on until you're ready to cast on for the underarm stitches, because the front panel and the back panel are worked the same way for at least the size extra small and the small, maybe even the medium as well, but it's the same. So I had time to decide, and I just spent a really long time trying to decide this 5 centimeter difference, and also because the measurements of the jacket before blocking, I just was really indecisive. So I ended up casting on the size small number of stitches for the underarm. And it also kind of matters too, because when you work in smock stitch, you can't really cast on in between those sizes either in order to make the smock stitch pattern work. So that was another thing, but I ended up casting on the size small, and then I was chatting with my friends who are also knitting this jacket as part of our year-long knit along, and they were like, you could always just do a mid-project block and then see how it fits. So I worked a few rounds of the smock stitch here, and then I put the stitches onto scrap yarn, and then I blocked it. And it did grow a little bit with blocking, but it's still a little bit smaller than size extra small, even though I cast on the size small. So my measurements post blocking, again, wrote it down because I knew I was not going to remember it exactly, but the jacket now measures in diameter 97 centimeters, so still smaller than the 101 centimeter bust of the size extra small. But I do think that that's fine because I do have to add the double knit button band for the front. And then also once you add the sleeves, I think that the smock stitch is going to stretch even more with the weight of the sleeves because you're picking up stitches all the way around as a drop shoulder construction. So I do think it's fine. I don't think it's going to grow 10 centimeters like that and become the size small measurement. I don't think, but we'll see. So yeah, all of this dilemma over a 5 centimeter bust difference, but I just didn't want it to grow too much because I do want this jacket to be a little bit more fitted. I don't want it to be too oversized because I'm thinking of cropping it a little bit. So yeah, that was my dilemma with this jacket, and now I have a lot of catching up to do. I was also thinking that I can't rip back, even though it's not that much, but that was another consideration because my friends that are doing the knit along, they're all almost done their Jenny sweater or their Jenny jacket, and so I was like, I have a lot of catching up to do. I have not finished the body, I have not started the sleeves, I don't have the button band. I have until the end of December, but yeah, there's still a lot of catching up to do, so I think I just decided I'm just gonna continue on and just knit the body, and then I'll start working on the sleeves. So I feel like I just rambled on this jacket for such a minute difference, but sometimes with these textured knits, I think you tend to second guess yourself because you're spending so much time knitting this texture that you just don't want it to go wrong because you don't want it to frog it. And that's really how I felt with this jacket. So I just really have to commit and yeah, catch up to the others. So I'm just going to continue on with the size small, and I feel like I'm going to be happy with the garment either way, I hope. So I hope that, yeah, it's not going to bother me too much the way that it fits. And I did meet the gauge of Petite knit when I was knitting my gauge swatch, so I think I just have to trust the process, and I'll be okay with a little bit more of a relaxed jacket, if that, by casting on the small. So that is my progress on my Jenny jacket v-neck. And the next two whips that I have to share are accessories. So the first one I will chat about is my test knit. So yeah, it's been several months since my last test knit. I do enjoy test knits because I like having a bit of a deadline. I like being able to work with a designer and get to understand more about their thought process with designing. It's also very exciting as well to work on a new pattern. So I was very excited to test knit this design for Morecaknit. So this is the penny tote bag, which is going to be released later on in October. So the penny tote bag is a large style tote shopper's bag that's worked from the bottom up in a moss stitch and with this really chunky boucle yarn. So the yarn that I'm using is Woolfolk Flette Bulky, and this yarn was gifted and sent to me by Woolfolk for the test knit. So yeah, very thankful that they sent this over to me, and I am knitting with the shade FB00. It's like the maybe undyed, like off-white shade. And I chose this because a lot of the colors that I'm knitting with right now are very neutral colors. So maybe a little bit boring to look at, but I thought with a bag like this, this off-white would just work well with everything. It may get stained a little bit easily, so maybe a slight regret with the color, but I just thought it would be really gorgeous in the fall and it would go with all of my knits as a bag. So yeah, I'm using Woolfolk. I held it up, but then I put it down right away. It's Woolfolk Flette Bulky, and this is a very chunky boucle yarn. This yarn has such an interesting construction and also feel to it. So it is a boucle yarn. I don't love working with boucle yarn. I've knit with one before, Knit Picks Alpaca Boucle, and I knit the Teddy Pillow by Petite Knit with it. And I really don't like working with boucle yarn. I find that it's a little bit more stiff, and also your needle always gets caught in the loops when you're knitting it, so you're also like fighting against the yarn, but it does create such a nice, luscious, like plump finished fabric. So it is kind of worth it in the end, but I just really didn't like working with it. So I kind of knew that before going into this test knit, but I did love the finished texture of this design. And this boucle is very different from the Knit Picks Alpaca Boucle. So maybe I can hold it up and show you. So the way that this yarn is plied is very interesting. I'll just maybe unravel my gauge swatch tail. So basically with this yarn, there's two different plies. It is 100% merino wool, but this inside strand kind of feels like it would be like cotton or something, but the tag does say 100% merino wool. So there's two different plies. There's this really like chunky lofty ply, which is the boucle, and then it's twisted around this really thin ply here. So I thought that was really interesting, and the way that it knits up is super dense, and yeah, really fluffy. Even the way that it photographs, like I'll maybe put some photos of it here, but it's just, yeah, like such an interesting construction, and I was really excited to try working with this boucle. I was thinking because there are less loops compared to the Knit Picks alpaca boucle, that it wouldn't be as tough to work with. And it's still a little bit tough to work with, but I think that's just the nature of knitting with a bulkier weight yarn like this on 3.5 millimeter needles. You are kind of fighting it a little bit. My needle doesn't get caught into the loops of this as much, but it is still a little bit more difficult than just a regular wool yarn. So I took out the leftovers of the alpaca boucle because I wanted to show the difference of the two yarns. The alpaca boucle is really thin, I think almost like a fingering or sport. When I knit the teddy pillow, I held two strands together like this. So this is how the alpaca boucle looks. Hopefully you can see that. And then this is the Woolfolk Flette bulky. I feel like it looks totally different, even like the loops on it. So yeah, I was really intrigued by how it was going to work up. Even the finish fabric looks totally different. I pulled out my super lumpy teddy pillow to kind of show you the difference in fabric. Maybe I can do like that so you can tell the difference between them. But the Woolfolk Flette bulky is just a lot more like substantial, and you can see like the loops of it. The way that it knits up, it almost kind of looks like punch needle in a way. I took a punch needle class last week, and that's why this texture really reminds me of it, but it's just very substantial. This is also in stockinette, to be fair, and then this is moss stitch, so it is a different fabric, but yeah, it just is super, super chunky. The only thing is with this yarn, it's very hard to tell your stitches apart because it's knit up at such a dense fabric that counting your stitches is really challenging, or I'm finding it really challenging. So anytime that I need to count stitches, I'm using stitch markers until I can kind of get more of a feel of the yarn and kind of understand how it's supposed to work up. So for my gauge swatch, I put stitch markers here to mark the gauge, which is 16 stitches. And then here is the bag. So yeah, finally getting to the bag. This is the bottom of the bag. So the way that the penny tote bag is knit up is you knit the base first, and then you pick up stitches, and then you work the body of the bag in the round. And here is how you work it. Again, you can see all of my stitch markers here because when I cast on, I put them here so I could count them, because you have to pick up on the other side. So I was a little bit confused by the construction at first, but I kind of understand the reasoning behind it, and I think it's a really smart design detail. So you first cast on stitches here, and then you're working the base of the bag out like this, like in this direction. So you're not knitting that many rows before you break the yarn, and then you put the stitches on hold here. So you're working the base of the bag outwards like this, and then you pick up stitches along your cast on here to get this seam, which goes on the inside of the bag, and then you're working out the same number of rows in the other direction. So you're working the base outwards like this, and then afterwards you're picking up stitches along the side. And yeah, at first I was a little bit confused. I thought that this was the cast on, and then you're just knitting upwards, and it was just going to be a really wide base of the bag. But I understand why Kate, the designer of Morecaknit, did this. I think that doing that creates a seam here, which is going to be stronger for the bottom base of the bag. My only recommendation as you're knitting with this yarn is to mark with stitch markers, because that really helps me with making sure I could pick up the correct number of stitches. Otherwise, I find it's really hard to read your work. So yeah, I am knitting the other side of the base, and then I'll pick up and then work the body of the bag in the round. As I mentioned, the bag is also knit in a moss stitch, so 2 rounds of knit 1, purl 1, and then 2 rounds of purl 1, knit 1, so you get kind of like this woven fabric. And at first I was like, okay, that is a lot of work for a fabric where you can't even see the stitches. I was like, oh, is that really necessary? But as I'm knitting it up, I do see that the moss stitch it has more structure, and it's more stiff than just a stockinette. So I do think that the moss stitch is also a nice design feature for this bag, because it's going to create a stronger finished fabric, and you want that especially for a bag where you don't want it to stretch out over time, and you do want it to be quite dense, so your things don't poke through. So yeah, it is a little bit tedious, especially in this boucle yarn, considering you don't see the stitches at all, but I do think that it is going to create a stronger finished bag. So yeah, once I knit the body of the bag, then you split for the straps of the bag. It's a pretty thick strap bag as well, and it's just open. There's no zipper that you insert afterwards, but I'm thinking that it's going to be a great bag to carry like knitting projects around, just a very nice everyday bag. But I am getting a bit ahead of myself. I just cast on the bag, and yeah, it's been a really cool process so far, really enjoying the boucle. And the last whip that I have to share is my Marie pillow, a pattern by Petite knit that was also in my fall knitting plans. So in my last episode, I had just cast it on, and really there's not that much of an update because it's a very straightforward design. You're just knitting a square in this textured stitch, so there's really not much of an update because I've just been knitting it back and forth. But here it is here. I think I'm about 1/5 of the way done. I'm knitting the larger square size in the pattern, the 50 by 50 centimeter pillow. I am knitting it off gauge though. My gauge is 24 stitches instead of 26 stitches, so I did have to modify the stitch count. So that was a little bit unfortunate because it is such a simple pattern, but you know what, no regrets, because it does also have instructions for sewing in the lining, so that is really helpful. The Marie pillow is a all over garter slip stitch pattern, and you can knit it in 1 color or 2 colors or even multiple colors. I think it would be a great project for scrap yarn because each row you can just change the garter slip stitch to be in another color, and I think that'd be really fun. But I had enough of these 2 yarns to just do a 2-color version, so I'm using Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool in the shade Brown Heather for the garter slip stitch, and then just for the garter color here, I am using Knit Picks Wool of the Andes Undyed. So yeah, not that much to really update on this pillow. It's been a really enjoyable knit, really meditative. It is my TV knitting project. I am watching me and my boyfriend are watching Terrace House on Netflix, and that is a Japanese reality show, and so I need to be able to see the screen basically at all times to read the subtitles. So this project has been really nice because I can basically knit this without looking. It's a 4-row repeat, so really easy to keep track of, and it's really evident what row you're on when you're working it as well, so you can knit on it and not have to look at it too much. But it is really tough on the hands, as I mentioned in my last podcast episode, working with worsted weight yarn on 3mm needles, kind of like the penny tote bag. It creates a thicker and stiffer fabric, which is going to be great for the pillow, but not that great for my hands. So it is really tough. I can only knit like maybe a centimeter or 2 before I need to take a break. Probably should be taking a break anyways, but yeah, then my hands start to really feel it. So this project has been pretty slow going. I might take a break on it for a little bit as I'm working on these other textured knits. I have a lot of textured knits going on at the moment, which has been really nice and fun, but yeah, sometimes my hands need a bit of a break, so this one might have to give, and I'll continue working on this in a few weeks. So this might be the last time you see this pillow for a little bit, but really enjoying the texture, and I'm really excited to have it done because it works really well with my living room rug. So that was everything for this podcast episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much if you've reached this point of the video. Like I said, the 1 year anniversary of this channel. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you've subscribed, I am really happy with creating all of these videos. It brings me a lot of joy. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, it's nice just having like knitting buddies to be able to chat about my project with, get so much help from all of you as well, and also hear what everyone else is working on. It's really inspiring. So thank you so much for being here. I don't want to get too cheesy, but I did want to acknowledge, my 1 year podcasting anniversary, and let me know again if you are interested in the Q&A. If you're not, no worries. I won't get offended or anything. I just want to know if people would find it interesting, or maybe I can also wait to do it maybe when I reach 10,000 subscribers. We'll see. But yeah, let me know if that would be interesting for a future video. And yeah, I think that's all I have to share today. So until I see you next time, happy knitting.